It locked up again. The time is 5:05. Mr. Newman isn't present. Everyone else is. The first item is to create the streetlight special assessment district for Woodlawn Street. Questions on that? It's going to be a public hearing. I did talk to DTE and they won't be put in this year. They just, because Ridge Road is ahead of it too. So he will try for early winter to get them in as soon as possible. Any questions on that? Public comment? Is there any public comment? We have the consent agenda for the minutes and statements and checks and treasurer's report.
Madam Chair, do you want, if everyone on the board would like to, we can look into the minutes now. Over the last week, we've spent a lot of time trying to correct them and make the changes that were requested of us. We have talked a little bit to MTA about like the revision of minutes, when they should be approved, and that was really helpful. But we can pull them up tonight if everyone would like to and go through piece by piece of what you want to change. If anyone would want to start with one of them.
Which date are we looking at with the minute?
August 15th are the ones that are first.
Take a look. Yeah, but I took a picture of something too. August 15th. Oh, I have one thing. Oh, no, I have just one thing that I needed to correct right there, so I got it.
We're looking for that. I know Belinda, she mentioned that she would like to go in the work session on the one item that she has.
Good evening, Board. Belinda Kingsley, Community Compliance Director, and I'm here to request authorization for circuit court litigation to be brought to abate a public nuisance at a property identified as 2850 Apple Ridge. And Apple Ridge is a single-family home. The property owner, Emma Robertson, passed away in 2011, and the house has been vacant since that time, pretty much. There may have been someone living there when she passed away, but we know it's been at least vacant since 2014. Just looking back, we've had over 20 enforcement cases that have been opened in the last 10 years for a variety of violations, blight, solid waste, tall grass. We started receiving complaints on this property this year, and after, well, let me back up. They did do an administrative search warrant in 2016, and the house was able to be left vacant, but it has continued to deteriorate since that time. And the most recent complaints came in July of 23, and we started inspecting it. The exterior had issues. We did do a vacant inspection with the approval of the daughter of the deceased property owner, and the inside is pretty much, as bad as the outside. There's a lot of issues in there. We just don't think it's fair at this point to leave it vacant in this condition. The neighbors are complaining about it. People are accessing the backyard and hanging out and also going into the park. We've tried to secure it. This is our third time securing it. So far, it seems to be holding, but, you know, people are still continuing to congregate in the backyard that don't belong there. We've tried to help the property owner's daughter to sell the property. She had indicated that she had somebody that was interested in it that would fix it up, but that fell through. She was referred to Habitat. They contacted her, and she did not want to sell it to them. So at this point, my last conversation with her, I asked her, what's the plan for the house? And she said that they're just going to let it sit and they'll eventually fix it up. So this, you know, it's a blighted situation in the neighborhood, and it's affecting other property owners. So we'd like to get approval to take it to circuit court.
Questions or comments? Trustee Swanson?
Do we know if there's a rat infestation at this location?
I actually just got the report today from Orkin. They were over there. They did not see any evidence of infestation, but they did see some burrowing that looks like it may be old, but they'll go back in another month and take a look at it and see. With cold weather coming, you know, that's when they're going to start trying to get inside houses. And the burrowing was not into the house. It looked like the house is secured.
So I don't know if this is really probably more a comment. I appreciate all that you've done to try and help the owner of the property work towards something that would help with the neighborhood. I can imagine that when you lose a family member, and if you don't have assets to fix it yourself, I can see where people get in a bind where that's difficult to do. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could work towards a policy, I'm not talking about tomorrow, where when we have places like events like this that happen, where we could work in a way, maybe Lori would be good at this, where we could help, because I'm thinking they're probably thinking they're going to lose a property, but that may be the ultimate, and that may be the outcome anyway. So if there was a policy where you can, I don't know which department would do it, where we could help with what the options are, and then be really clear about what's going to be needed. So to say we're just going to let it sit, that's not going to work, because then it's going to become a bigger issue in court, and then there's more money that's going to have to be expended on both sides. So I don't know what way to help people feel like here are the options where it's more of a choice. Because I know you work towards compliance. I know that this didn't end up at this place today, but I would like to see some kind of system where that could happen, because I think our best way forward in a lot of ways with the housing is, especially on anywhere, but especially on the side of town where this is where it's so dense, that if we can help with properties that are there, it's always easier usually to take care of a property that's existing than to build new. And you got infrastructure there, you got sewer, you got water. So, I mean, there's a lot of places where just maintaining the housing that we have would be helpful, but that's also hard. So this home represents a family's generational wealth. So I can see where they're in a pickle and they don't want to give that up, but they're not in a place where they can take care of it anymore either. So if there's a way to work towards something that can make people feel better, I think that would be good. It's not going to stop this situation, but this situation is just a reminder that this is not the first time this is going to happen probably around the township, and having a proactive, compassionate way of, and I'm not saying people aren't compassionate, I'm just saying having a way of handling it at that point when the first, I don't know when the first time, it sounds like we've been on this one for a long time, that first entry point would give a little time to think about it. From 2011 to now, that's a long time to be thinking about what options are. So I would like us to consider that in an effort to provide a method for helping get the housing stock that we have in good order, if that makes sense. So thank you for all that you've done. I do know that ordinances works towards compliance. And so I'm not making any judgment that didn't happen here, but I can see that when people are in this kind of predicament, they probably need more help than a process of help.
Right. And it's not a house that needs to be demoed or anything. There's no demolition order on it. It definitely can be saved, but it is going to take money that I truly believe they don't have to, to use on it. So,
And Habitat for Humanity did reach out to them.
yes.
Which is often one of the things that the attorney's office tries to do is connect the owners or the estate, whoever it is, with Habitat for Humanity to see if there's an opportunity to purchase it and to, fix it up. In this case, it was brought to our attention by the person who lives very close, and kids were hanging out there and cutting through the back of the property to go to the park at Apple Ridge, and I don't know, was it a listed vacant structure? I don't even know if it was.
It was, and they had registered it consistently over the years. But then during the pandemic, we lost track of some of the vacant properties. They weren't being registered, and so this is one that came back on our radar based on complaints, though.
And it seems like vacant properties are sitting for too long. And they deteriorate from the inside out often, and it's housing, as we know, is needed, so you're right. I thought Habitat might be able to work out with it.
Yeah, that'd be the best solution.
They had a potential purchaser and that fell through, but 10
Even the
years-
potential purchaser is going to have to know, like, if you take possession of this house, here are the things that are going to need to be done, because we're not, it's a little bit like the Gulf Village situation, like, once it gets to this place, we're not going to wait another 10
Right.
years, right, for that to happen. So I think, and sometimes people just have to have things laid out in front of them. Like, I'm thinking kind of, Attorney Winters is kind of like an attorney. What you want and what you're going to be able to do are two different things. Sometimes you need somebody, maybe that's not our role, I don't know, but you need somebody to lay out, like, here are the options, and then you maybe need a little time to think about it, but it isn't, I'm going to hold out till I get what I want. That's not usually how things work.
Right. And if it does, if it is approved for litigation, that would be something a future purchaser would be made aware of. Here are the issues that need to be resolved, to be able to occupy the house. And a timeline is established usually to get that done.
So do they ever send us to, what is it, mediation? Do any of these cases ever end up at mediation?
Not typically, because I think what this house represents is a situation that's it's almost becoming demolition by neglect. And this has probably been a property that I think we have done probably more for to try and lay out those options. And sometimes it keeps changing. On one time, there's an agreement to sell to a third party or even to Habitat. And then there's a change of heart. And the problem is trying to balance out those type of interests with those of the neighbors. And the neighbors have had to endure an awful lot of issues from mold, mildew, the issues of it becoming almost known as being a place to quote-unquote hang out because it is vacant, providing access from the yard into the Apple Ridge Park also has raised some pretty serious issues for the community. So it's a balancing act, and at some point in time, you've exhausted all your different options. I think the litigation is always kind of a last resort type situation. At this point, whether or not that will continue to, maybe there'll be a change of heart, I'm not really sure. But again, the rights of the property owner have to also be balanced by the rights of those who live nearby. And the evidence I'm hearing right now of evidence of burying, that doesn't sound good. I didn't know that was. Obviously came about today, and after seeing the pictures for a number of different times inside the house, it's just. I'm afraid that if it continues to exist in its current condition, it may be reach that point of no return. So this might be a way of trying to at least have those options come out. And I think that what we can do, if the board does approve it, is we can prepare the lawsuit, maybe not file it, but to meet with the owners for one last opportunity to say, we've been authorized to proceed. Here is the lawsuit. Do you have a plan beyond just, I think I'm going to do something? If you don't have a plan that's realistic, then I would file the lawsuit. But I think that once it's authorized, we can at least have it prepared and say, maybe arrange a meeting over here to do maybe a quasi-type mediation of just trying to at least have one more, quote, last chance to come up with a solution. We're not trying to force anyone to sell their house to a third party, be it Habitat or anybody else. It's just that Habitat has been in that neighborhood over the years. They have renovated a number of properties. And quite frankly, the offers that I have seen them make to property owners have been, very fair. It's not our role to advocate for either one, but what I would suggest we do on this one, given the kind of the backstory, is to authorize, if the board so desires, prepare the lawsuit, have it ready to be filed, but have one meeting as a township to see if we can reach a resolution short of filing. That way, we have a plan of action if it falls through.
Thank you, Belinda. Keita, I know that you want to do a brief update on. Yeah, this row, since you're here.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Just to remind folks who may not know the work that we've been doing, we've been engaged in both diversity, inclusion, and equity training for staff, as well as sort of grounding that work in preparations for a strategic plan and planning process for the township that is going to be grounded in health equity and looking at trying to create some health equity for all the different populations here in the township, because if we just take one measure of life expectancy, it is low for everyone. And in fact, for the last week, I've been really considering the sort of economic consequences that would translate to, in terms of folks not really living long enough to benefit from the Social Security retirement funds that they've paid into their entire lives. So we're just sort of looking at kind of the global consequences of the problem. We are, at this point, we've completed 2 trainings. I have taken input from the administrative staff and would like to schedule a training and to talk about your strategic plan ideas, if we could, within the next couple of weeks. And then I should have a sort of a draft outline, and then we could sit down and review that. But I want to be sure to get everyone's thoughts and input before I even create an outline.
Keita, how would you like the trustees to communicate? Just email or phone?
I think if you could email me, I guess, 3 dates and times between now and, let's say, November 4th or 5th. That would be great. And by that, I mean sort of would you like evenings or weekends? I'm assuming most folks are busy during the day, 9 to 5. So I think we would be looking at whether you prefer weekday evenings or maybe 3 hours on a Saturday. We can do either. So just those kind of preferences, like, yes, weekday evenings and maybe Monday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday might be your preference. Or if you'd prefer a a weekend day, let me know if we'd be talking, before church or after church or somewhere in the middle, but I need about 3 hours.
Do you want to individually or as a group?
Well, there's because of the regulation on notifying, right? Is it the limit 3? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Correct.
so we'll need to do, I think, 2 groups of 3
Okay.
for the elected officials. 3, 1, 2, 2. So, you know what? Because I'm going to be meeting with you 3 individually, let's just do the trustees in groups of 3. So that would be maybe 2 groups of 2? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the deadline again?
Anytime between, let's say...
November? Do you say November?
the end of the first week of November, between... what is the beginning of next week? Anyone have a calendar?
The 23rd is the first of the next week.
So yes, between,
And then that week goes through the 4th is the Saturday.
so yes, so between the 23rd and the 4th of November. And weekend day evenings or weekend day? And I can tell you, just to give you some feedback, I found working with the staff to be really quite wonderful and eye-opening. People have been really receptive to the new information that they've received, and really productive in terms of taking that information and applying it to the challenge of trying to structure, a strategic health plan. I met with one neighborhood group. Hope to meet with West Willow perhaps next month. I couldn't be there yesterday. But I would like to start with those 2 groups. What was the...
I think it was Oakland Hawthorne, right, that you met with.
Right, so those 2 zip codes, because of their proximity, their location in the economic opportunity corridor, and the fact that when I really looked at both geographically, they experience the same degree, perhaps not the same extent, but they're all cut off and surrounded by fast-moving traffic on all sides.
All right.
Does anyone else have questions of a specific nature I can address? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, no, thank you, guys.
Actually, I wanted to ask a quick question. Yeah. Is this weekend a possibility?
Yes, if there are a couple folks free, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We'll go. Okay. Yeah, and phone number, I guess. Yeah, or email, either one. Jason, would you like to go over your request for the ordinance revision?
Good evening, Township Board of Trustees. Jason Ikoangeli, the Township's Planning Director. This evening before you is a resolution for a first reading for a batch of ordinance amendments, which I'd like to kind of go through with you at this time. A lot of these amendments in this list are attached to a new zoning section that we've been working on, probably for at least the last 6 months to a year in some capacity or another. And it deals with the adaptive reuse of buildings. The township has some obsolete buildings in and around the township, commercial buildings specifically, as well as historically other buildings, such as school buildings that have been underutilized or have been utilized in a different manner other than the function of being a school. So in order to sort of put our best foot forward and be proactive about the reuse of these buildings, and then also to address some past reuse of buildings, we thought it would be prudent to legitimize the use by putting it into the zoning ordinance. So what you have before you this evening is what we're calling the adaptive reuse ordinance. And so what is the adaptive reuse? Well, one of the sections in the ordinance being amended is the definition section, which is section 201, adding a new definition for the adaptive reuse, which is the development of a new use for an older building or for a building originally designed for a special or specific purpose. Good examples of this are buildings like school buildings, other civic buildings with a historical character, or commercial buildings that have somehow become obsolete. Prime example of that would be, say, the Walmart Supercenter on Ellsworth Road, where it was originally built for 144,000 square feet of retail space, and no retailers that no longer want to utilize that much building for retail. As we know, retail has changed in its dynamic from brick and mortar stores to online retailing. And so buildings of that size, current retailers are no longer interested in that much square footage. And so this adaptive reuse section would allow for the reuse of these buildings for different types of uses, subject to conditions. And so I'll touch on the adaptive reuse ordinance since I sort of led off with it. So this new ordinance would be section 1167 in the zoning ordinance under Article 11. And the intent, and I won't read this verbatim, but the intent is to facilitate the retention and conversion of older or economically distressed, existing, underutilized, or historically significant buildings to viable uses, and to reuse these existing buildings to provide new opportunity, and then also the environmental sustainability portion of this by not putting old buildings into landfills like we unfortunately had to with the Galt Village Shopping Center. And so this ordinance provides basically some guardrails to allow for developers to step in and reuse some of these existing buildings if they meet qualifying criteria, such as being in the neighborhood commercial district, general business district, regional commercial district, neighborhood corridor, or our former-based district, or they can be a civic building or a public school building in any district. It applies to buildings that are at least 20 years old. The project results in a change of use in a portion or all of the existing building, and the existing building can't be destroyed by any means or extent that's 50 years or 50% of its replacement cost. It requires the setbacks to all be consistent with the underlying zoning. It requires that parking potentially might have to be added if the use requires additional parking that wouldn't otherwise be there. It requires loading zones. And then the uses, the ordinance gives a sort of a comprehensive list of what uses could go into these buildings and prohibits others. So the permitted uses would be any uses that the zoning district already allows for. However, it does not allow for assembly uses, clubs, banquet halls, or other such uses aren't permitted. Now, this ordinance is designed to look at school buildings, and historically school buildings are located within residential districts. So that's why there's this prohibition on assembly type uses or clubs or banquet halls in this ordinance, because those aren't really compatible uses for school buildings that might otherwise be within a neighborhood type setting. And then the following uses can be allowed as a special conditional use at the Planning Commission. Special conditional uses, indoor climate controlled storage, retail that's greater than 20,000 square feet, which is otherwise prohibited in the form-based district, commercial kennels or pet daycares, veterinary clinics, fitness, gymnastics, exercise centers, indoor recreation facilities, theaters, art studios, trade schools, offices, or flex office space, daycare centers, or craft trades such as breweries, coffee roasters, bakeries, or culinary businesses. And then unless listed in this section, other uses are not prohibited. And then there's specific conditions, and I won't go all through these verbatim, but basically the specific conditions require that there be a development agreement that's put in place, that the site be brought into compliance with the current zoning ordinance requirements for parking lots, paving, and landscaping, and that the necessary facade improvements to the building if the building is tired, and that the applicant shall include security cameras and license plate readers. And then the Planning Commission has the authority to require traffic, environmental, and other reports that may aid in the site plan process. So again, all of these new uses or adaptive reuses would require a site plan approval. So it would go through a very stringent approval process of site plan, special conditional use, which requires a public hearing, and then has to meet all of the criteria of being brought into the current ordinance standards. Now, a good example of this that's already sort of being done in the township, even though it really isn't within zoning at this point yet, would be the, and I always get the school name incorrect, but it's the Chapel Business Center, which used to be the Chapel Elementary School, is a prime example of how this type of ordinance can benefit the community by reusing the existing school building for, I think some of the businesses that are in there now, when I've walked through, are daycares, dance studios. There's some nonprofits in there that give counseling to young adults. I think the Willow Run Acres Garden Club has a portion of that as well. So those are types of uses that utilize different sort of schoolrooms in that building, and when you go there, there's a sign out front that shows you the tenants in there, and they're all neighborhood oriented. They're things people in the neighborhood need, and so that's how I think this ordinance helps deal with the reuse of school buildings and other institutional buildings that might be in neighborhoods. And as far as commercial districts go, there is a big there's a lot of commercial retail buildings being reused at this point for a mix of uses. There's projects all over the state where older commercial Walmart buildings, Kmart buildings, Kroger's, a good example of this in our community is like the former Farmer Jack building has been split into two uses and is now a fitness club or Crunch Time Fitness and a foaling warehouse. This allows for developers to come in, get a hold of these existing buildings, and then do something creative with them, split them into different uses, reorganize the interior space to allow for more than just one business like a Walmart, because the Walmart building has been on the market for a number of years, and no one has wanted to purchase it just based on the immense size of the building. So this ordinance would allow someone to come in and do something creative or outside the box, at least from what our ordinance currently allows, and re-tenant or redevelop that space. And so section 1167 is all brand new language. And then also included is the portion of the ordinance, the districts, where you'll see that it was added as a special conditional use in all of those commercial districts and then residential districts. And that is sort of it for the adaptive reuse portion. So maybe before I go on to the other items that are included in this group, I'll take questions on the adaptive reuse ordinance, since that's the one that's sort of the bigger portion of this amendment block.
Questions?
Yes, I have a
Trustee
question.
Newman?
Yes, about the adaptive reuse. If you have a group that's looking to say, get a property, first, do you own the property like Walmart? Is that, say if the group wanted to buy a Walmart, or would they own that property, or even a school? Would they own that property, or would they be leasing it somehow?
Most of the times with redevelopment of properties like a Walmart, there's usually a purchase agreement at the bare minimum in place before they start contacting our office about entitlement. Or they've either secured it through a purchase agreement or they're about ready to.
Okay.
We very rarely get developers going through the entitlement process just on a lease. Most of the businesses that are brand new through new construction come in through a purchase agreement type model before they reach out to the planning department. Now, infill businesses or businesses that may come into, say, the shopping center or Paint Creek across the street, they will come in typically with just a lease in hand before they start the process of going through like the new business registration process. But it would be my expectation that anyone that looks to do an adaptive reuse project is going to enter into a purchase agreement to own it, or at the very least, at least find out what the entitlement process is, then enter into that type of an agreement.
Okay. And as far as, say, gathering for meetings or, different events, would that fall under a certain type of criteria?
So the way this ordinance is written, there would be a prohibition on assembly type uses. Now, that's not to say that a fitness studio isn't going to have fitness classes, because we understand that they'll have things like that, but this would be a prohibition on like assembly halls, clubs, banquet centers, those types of uses where, you're going to have parties or, wakes or weddings. This doesn't contemplate those types of uses.
Okay, so this is mainly like schools or anything in the neighborhood to be reused, but not for that purpose, not for parties or assemblies.
Right. Yeah. So like the Chapel Business Center, again, is probably the best example locally of where the school is being reused for daycares. I think there's a Brazilian drumming class that meets in there. Those types of businesses that, rent out classrooms from the school district, and then they have like a multi-tenant sign out front, and the school kind of acts as a community hub for more of those community, community-based type, neighborhood-based businesses.
Okay. All right, thanks. So it's mainly just reusing a neighborhood place, reusing it for something different than its primary purpose.
It could be. So, I mean, some of the, there's examples around the state. Like in my hometown, there was an old Lazy Boy factory that was a really historically significant, like 4-story brick building that was redone by the city of Monroe into senior housing, to reutilize that building rather than to tear it down. So this would be what we would hope that this ordinance would do. If there's, say, another school building in the future that becomes something else, or the school district wants to become something else, or they want to sell it to someone who wants to do something else, at least there's rules as to what it can become, and guidelines for it, so that we don't have the issues that we have now where on occasion the school leases out part of a building to people that we don't have an awareness of, and then we have businesses operating that we're not familiar with. This gives a pathway forward for that to happen. But then also, importantly too, like the Walmart building is a huge anchor store that's never going to be a single tenant retailer again, and it provides the opportunity for someone to step in there and maybe break that building up into 1, 2, 3, 4 different spaces that can be, different businesses. and maybe redo the facade to make it look like it's just an extension of the shopping center so that we can recycle the space without having to just be hamstrung by the current ordinance standards that say, well, it has to be retail. You know, it's real hard to find someone who wants that much space. So this gives that flexibility to do something different.
Okay. Right, thanks.
Trustee Swank?
So I really appreciate the thinking that's happening around here. I am cautious about especially the school stuff, partly because I really think we need to start thinking about how there's community generational property. I consider schools those, where the community has built it, the community has sustained it, the community has put all that money into it, that you're never going to sell it for the value of what the community's put into it. So this doesn't happen. Like when I look at other communities around in Washtenaw County, only in our area do I see things that are neglected and then demolished and not repurposed. So there are other examples, like Bayer Hospital shifting to a different model. That building is used for bariatric surgery, which is similar to what they were doing, but that's worked out well for that corner. The old Bayer Hospital is a convalescent home. The other one, the old Ypsilanti High School, the historic structure is housing now. So in some ways it does work, but then I look at what's happened to us. Artists sold for a ridiculously low sum, ridiculous. Like you can't even buy a house right now for that, and that's acreage, and it's a building with a commercial kitchen that taxpayer dollars put in, like a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen. So $300,000, I don't even know if that would pay the electric bill for a couple years. So I like the thinking, and I think it's needed, but I'm really concerned about what might happen, and if we're going to get the best thing that's going to happen for those communities. The other thing that I'm really cautious about when it comes to schools, the density in the former Willow Run school area and the housing purposefully was planned to have those schools as the centerpiece of those neighborhoods. So I like the fact that this says there's kind of all these things that maybe you can't do because it's in a neighborhood. But then, like, I'm just thinking, like, traffic and all that kind of stuff. And so the chapel is a good example because at least the people coming in, there's, like, really kind of a community benefit there. People can go, they can go to a class, they might be using daycare. YMCA is doing some stuff there. So I like the thinking, but I am very nervous about that because the other thing with the school is that people really don't like think about or talk about, and again, I'm a teacher, like I teach in that school system, is that the only reason why those buildings aren't used is because our school systems aren't, that particular school system is having a lot of trouble attracting people and keeping enrollment up. So if everybody that was over there went to school there, which I don't know, like when we're looking out in the future, I hope it's not a given that people don't want to put their children there forever, but what happens is that there won't be a lot of alternatives, right? So there isn't a lot of property over there in that school system. If you decided that you needed a new school 20 years down the road, like those tracts of land are already determined, and that's green space and it's shared space. And so I think we've got to be a little careful because we're not, these are long-ranging decisions. Like Walmart that one doesn't concern me as much because you're right. If you go to other places like I spend time in Minneapolis, St. Paul, visiting people, and they turn all kinds of stuff into the coolest stuff that could be, where people are having it just is a magnet for stuff. But schools, that doesn't seem like it's going to be the right thing. And then I do get concerned because often what happens in the schools is the people who are making those decisions, they're not people who live here, stay here, know here. They come in, they're here for a little while, and then they're making real big decisions that are going to impact a community for a really long time. So whatever we can do which is limited. I get it. It's not our lane, but whatever we can do to help guide it towards the future that we're hoping for, and this is a start. I'm just not 100% convinced like it's as tight as it's going to need to be for those school buildings. And maybe it depends on the school itself. So like Artist School, which has been sold to someone, is on a corner in an industrial area. Like it's really not in a neighborhood, that particular school. Other schools are like right in the heart of it. Like the Kettering property, right in the heart of it. You can't extract that out of the neighborhood. The Thurston property that's now vacant land, you can't extract that out of a neighborhood. So I think we have to be careful about those types of things. What does it mean if it's vacant property? I'm sure it's going to fall under these, even if there's not a building on it, because the zoning would be the same because it was a former school, I'm guessing. That's a question?
I think in that regard, no. This is only for the reuse of buildings.
Okay.
So vacant property would revert just back to the single-family district that it's in. So you
Okay.
would only be eligible to build houses on that.
Okay. I appreciate it.
No,
I'll
it's
do
all-
more
no,
deep
it's-
reading.
it's-
I'm
it's
just passionate about
all
this
very
because
good.
I think stuff has come off the, we just heard Keita talking about some of the areas that are, on the opportunity index. They've got the fast-moving traffic. Like a lot of these buildings are all in there. So I want to make sure that whatever we're deciding to do, really has an opportunity to just take it to another place that's all thought out and all that. So again, Jason, I appreciate all the work you're doing. I've just watched too many buildings go into disrepair, be demolished, that were meant for, like the community put their heart and soul in those buildings. And that side of town helped build the larger community that we've got here. Like the south side, I'm not saying they didn't matter. Farmers were working their tails off too. Like that all matters. But when we're talking about that side of town, the factories, the housing, the density, the schools, like people worked really hard for the future of our community. I don't want to see us do anything that just predatorily gives somebody property when it's community property, because
Well,
schools are community property, they're not
And
commercial.
to follow up on your thought, I think the reason why this is important is for what you just said, because the language that's currently in the ordinance, if the school district were to lease a property or to sell it, our ordinance just basically currently has those schools in single-family residential districts where really all that's allows is single-family housing, churches, and, like utility buildings that are necessary for the function of the neighborhood. This puts into place, well, if you decide to do that, we actually now have standards that you have to meet. A development agreement, traffic studies if required by the planning commission, site plan approval, it has to be brought up to code, and these are the uses that you can do there. Whereas right now, none of that stuff exists. So if they were to say, well, we're going to sell the school and we're selling it to this person who's going to do a development, right now, I mean, the only thing we have on the books is it's a school use and it's in a residential district. We're kind of just, I don't want to say locked, but we really don't have a vehicle to address, okay, well, if you're going to do that, this is all the stuff that you have to do. And I think this would at least put into place some real strong infrastructure for us to say, okay, well, we get that you're going to sell this school, but this is all you can do with it, and this is what you have to do if it's going to happen. And further, you're going to have to go to the Board of Trustees and enter into a development agreement, which spells out all of the ins and outs. What that might be: additional parking, removing parking, lighting, getting rid of some of the lighting because it is in a neighborhood. All of that stuff then becomes negotiable.
Noise, all that kind of stuff.
So,
See, that's why I need a planner to calm me down.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple questions. I heard you say residential, and I don't see that listed in the,
So there should,
uses.
yeah, so there should be in your
on it.
packet, the sections where it says R1 through R4 and R4 through R5, and it's listed at the bottom of that. And I think Lisa has it on the screen. You can see that SLPC that's added to those districts, and then it references the section. So that would be to where in the residential district, if it's a school building, which is a permitted use, and someone wants to use adaptive reuse, then it immediately puts them into section 1167, which has all of these rules and regulations, because it only applies to schools and other institutional buildings like township-owned structures or buildings.
What about big boxes?
Yes, so this is in, Lisa, if you can see there in the neighborhood business and general business, it's a special land use at the Planning Commission. And then in the form-based district, it's also listed as a special conditional use. So that's Washtenaw, Michigan Avenue, and those neighborhoods as well. So, and again, it's only applicable to, there's a very specific criteria. The buildings have to be 20 years or older. They have to have been lawfully established at the time they are built, and all of those types of, so this is really defined in scope to only include like larger retail buildings that might not otherwise be able to re-tenant out. It has some good applications for maybe the Sunrise Plaza or the Sunshine Shopping Center. That's where there's used to be Save-A-Lot, and now I can't remember, the Shoppers Marketplace is there. This could even potentially work if in that application, if we ever needed to, if someone came in and wanted to do the adaptive reuse and look at that building because they needed to re-tenant the building or redo it in order to break the space up, it could be used in that application as well. So it's very defined in its scope. It's really only obsolete commercial buildings and schools or buildings that have a historic significance. So it's in that criteria. The intent is to facilitate the retention, conversion of older, economically distressed, existing, underutilized, or historically significant buildings. Tailored to encourage and promote, but I don't want to go into reading it in verbatim, but it's very particular on the criteria that need to be met, and it's project needs to be located in neighborhood commercial, general commercial, regional commercial, or the form-based districts, or the adaptive reuse of a civic building, which means something that we own, or a public school building in any district. Applies to any building that's at least 20 years old and that was constructed in accordance at the time with the building code, and the project results in a change of use in all or a portion of the existing building, and then the existing buildings may not be destroyed by any means to the extent of 50% of its replacement cost, meaning if it's one of these types of buildings and it's already been destroyed by fire and someone's trying to step in and now do this, it's not eligible under that rule.
The at-home store I know has,
That would be another one that would kind of fall into this.
and housing would be allowed there?
It would not. So this is very, again, prescriptive, and housing is not not a use that would be currently in this ordinance.
So I wondered, just one more question. I wondered, like, is this something that other community, like the language you're doing, or is this something new that we're just trying here? Or is this something that other communities have tried to do in these cases?
No, I mean, in planning, there's really nothing new under the sun. And so this is sort of a collaboration between me and Ben Carlisle from Carlisle Wortman.
Okay.
And so some of this language has been pulled from other communities where they're doing this type of work. And from talking to other colleagues, we're actually getting ahead of this, where a lot of other jurisdictions are doing theirs through consent judgments. So they're actually doing the deals or adaptive reuse permitting through friendly lawsuits. And I know that that's not something that Mr. Winters or his law firm is interested in doing. So that's why we're trying to get out in front of these types of things by having an ordinance in place, so that we're not getting into that kind of litigation with the developer in order to do these kind of deals. Now, they happen, I mean, and again, they're friendly lawsuits, but that's just not the vehicle that we want to use to try to do development in town. And then just briefly, the other sections of the ordinance that we're amending, one is part of the language that's found in section 1155, which is state licensed residential childcare. We're just simply removing the specific state law numbering for their laws and replacing it with the state of Michigan licensing rules. And that's just done because they change their rules as often as we do, and this just is sort of keeps it generic that we just follow the state licensing rules as it applies to these types of facilities, so that we're not having to constantly amend our ordinance every time they amend theirs. And then the other part of this is the transparency alternatives. This was a section of the ordinance that was actually left out and was supposed to be there when the ordinance, the wholesale new ordinance was adopted. This language allows for, in the form-based districts, for developers to seek relief from the amount of window transparency in a building by doing some alternatives. And those alternatives are changing the wall design, providing outdoor dining or seating, the inclusion of outdoor dining and seating on a plan, or C, a permanent art, non-commercial art or graphic design, or some sort of public art display. If they do these things, they can get relief from the requirement for all of the glass. And so a good example of this would be Aldi would seek relief from this section of the ordinance because they couldn't, there are parts of their building where had they put glass windows in, you'd basically be looking into their stock room or their store room where they keep the goods before they're put on the shelf. And so it doesn't make sense to make them put glass on those sides of the buildings. And so in order to give them relief from doing so, they added additional things to their building, like providing the public art area sort of at the corner of Brinker and Huron, and then providing some additional architectural materials on their building to get away from that. So this was something that was supposed to have been in the ordinance and wasn't, and this basically just puts it back. It's a relief valve for people who just either can't put the glass in because they don't want to display like their security office in their storeroom. It gives them alternatives so that they can meet the intent of the ordinance. And that's all the ordinance amendments that are before you this evening. Again, the bulk of it was just the changes to all the different sections in order to put in place this adaptive reuse portion of the ordinance. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions you might have on sort of those last two issues.
I just have a couple on the child and adult care facilities. And I know you just changed that one section, but could this be an opportunity to look at something else? I thought it used to be on a primary road if it was a larger facility, because, again, that wouldn't fit into a subdivision. So I don't know if we took that out previously, but it used to be the larger facilities were on a primary road that could accommodate the traffic, because if it's 20 or more, I think it is.
And I didn't have a chance to look through that portion of the ordinance, so I don't have a good quick answer for you. Only because I was just prepared to talk about the Michigan law change, but I can definitely look into that. And if that's something that we want to amend, my anticipated schedule, just so you as a board are aware, I don't plan on having this many ordinance amendments. Again, I know you've kind of been inundated with resolutions and readings the last 3 or 4 months. I anticipate just trying to do 2 batch sums a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, as we find things that needed to be amended. So just know that I appreciate the fact that you guys have been looking at ordinance amendments for 3 straight months. But Supervisor, to your point, we can absolutely look into the child care ordinance and look to see if that change was in if it was in the last ordinance and somehow didn't make it into this one. Putting it back in, we'll absolutely add it to the list of amendments that we'll do in the next round.
Because you have to accommodate such a large facility in a subdivision, there's...
Yeah, I don't know that we would. I think that our office, for anyone where it's 6 or less,
That's different.
they can go into a regular single-family district, but the adult, once it gets to 7 to 12, then it's subject to a site plan and all of that other kind of stuff. And we have to make sure that there's parking, legal agreements.
Fire marshal review.
Oh, absolutely. The building department has to walk through it. They have to have enough outdoor play area available for the facility and all that. But for the larger 13 to 20, well, I can absolutely look through here and verify and make sure that,
And once it's approved at the planning, is it good for a year? Or if the petitioner doesn't open up a facility within a year, is it good for a year?
I think the special conditional use is actually good for, it runs with the property unless the use ceases. So we had, and the reason I know that is because we had one come before the Planning Commission, I know Gloria might remember it, where there was a new group home and there's a provision where there's a distance requirement from another licensed group daycare home. And we had it on the books as granting a special conditional use to, like, say, the neighbor down the street a little bit. And so the lady was tabled the night of the meeting so she could go and verify with the state that the licensure was still good for the house down the street. And then once she provided us with documentation that the state license was no longer valid, then we rescinded the special conditional use at that house so that she could open hers. So our special conditional use agreement runs with the property as long as the person continues to maintain their state license and operate in accordance with state law.
Even if they don't open, they still have that designation?
Well, they're required. Well, it's funny that you bring that up because the one lady who wasn't the new petitioner but had it from years past, she wasn't open for business, but she was still paying the state to get her inspections and still keep the license valid because she didn't want it to lapse, so she didn't have to go through all of the administrative work. So the state will allow someone to keep their license in good standing even if they don't accept children, as clients or however that works, new parents and their children. So, sure.
Thank you. All right. This is first reading. Second reading, we'll come back and we can make changes
Thank you.
based on input. Is there anyone else I need to do before we go to the minutes, which is going to take a while? Is Johnny? We have, number 3 is request to approve the amendment to the service contract between Washoe County for senior nutrition. And number 4, which is request authorization to submit permit application materials for sediment sampling on Ford Lake. This was requested by the Huron River watershed, right? Michael?
Good evening. In front of you is a letter from the Huron River Watershed Council to request some sampling at the headwaters of Ford Lake so they can take a profile before they move forward with the Penn Dam removal. So at the close of their project, if needed, they can come back and sample again and compare those test results to see if there was any impact. So this request doesn't cost the township any dollars, from my understanding, and this just gives them the authority to go grab those samples since the land is owned by the township. So one thing, if this is approved, I would send a letter back to them asking them to provide those results when they're available.
Questions, comments, trustee Swanson?
I am concerned. I appreciate this. I think it's a great idea that we do it. I am concerned that when the release happens, there's a lot of disputes about the amount of sediment, what's in the sediment. And, I mean, even contrary to the letter that we got that said, everything's fine, they've got a report. So I guess that the concern is, I love that we were going to have a baseline, but if the baseline comes back after they do it and it's a problem, like what's going to happen there? Like, there are lots of examples around around the country, around the state, around locally. You look at the release of the dioxin with the Gelman situation and that plume, like once it's released, it gets really hard to figure out what we're going to do later. So I guess I appreciate the baseline, but then I'm just concerned that, so what's the plan if they release it and then suddenly there's a problem because that problem has been pushed from another community into our community? Like, who's going to clean it up? Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to do that? So that would be my concern about that. And I know that you're not here to answer that question for us, but, when they say to do the next test, we would be hopeful that that next test would be fine and would show there's no change. But what if it isn't? There's nothing outlined as to what's going to happen. And then I get the feeling that, when this is talked about, that in some ways people think, well, Ford Lake's got a lot of issues and, but we don't need to make it any worse, I guess, is what I'm thinking, right? So that may be true, and that happened prior to all of us being responsible for it, but it shouldn't be allowed to continue. The other big thing is that it isn't a drinking water source. So, like, if there's a problem with anything and it impacts someone's drinking water, like Ann Arbor's drinking water comes from like the Barton area, then there's swift action on that, as there should be. But again, it's not a good idea to push stuff into a waterway that maybe isn't someone's drinking water, but it's still not good. I mean, our community is there. So anyway, I appreciate you, Mike. I know you're super thorough. But I'll just remind the board that we have residents that live where this Penn Dam is going to happen. We don't have a lot of say because this isn't our dam. Right. But we have residents that live on this lake that have urged us to not support the removal of it. I would want people to know that any meetings that I've attended, it would have been cheaper to repair it than to fix it. And then we got a letter, I think the other letter was in here, from saying, there's a lot of misinformation. I went to the meeting at the Freight House, and it wasn't, residents were speaking up. A lot of them are actually scientists that were speaking up. But the concerning thing to me in the letter that we got as elected officials is that it said that there's a lot of misinformation, and especially around the sediment. And when that meeting started and it was presented, it was the presenters there that were talking about how much sediment was there and how much sediment would have to be taken out and trucked away. It was not residents saying that that was the plan. And it was truckloads.
200.
Yes, cubic feet. I don't know the specifics of it, but I was at the meeting personally myself. The presentation was done by the people who were there that were talking about it, and then suddenly, magically, now the sediment maybe doesn't have to be removed. So the letter that we got was kind of saying, well, there's a lot of misinformation, but it's important to understand that that meeting was not led. Residents asked questions, and some of them had alternative findings from what was in the sediment, but the person or the people who told the people who were in the Freight House at that meeting that 200 truckloads would have to be taken out, that was not residents that said that was going to have to happen. So again, this isn't you, Mike. I want the board to know that that is a concern to me, because once it's released and it comes to us, it's going to come down the river swiftly, and it's going to land right in Ford Lake, right there, where it's just going to be sitting, and it'll be our problem if we don't understand what's going to happen. So if you guys do this, okay, great, it's your choice. We realize it's not our lane. But what happens if you release it in this best case scenario that everybody has magically proposed isn't the case? Because I really don't want to hear people tell us, well, it's not your drinking water. Too bad. It wasn't our sediment until you push it down our way. So I am concerned about that. I know there's a lot of different feeling about it. There's a big push and a lot of money to remove dams. And that's maybe the right thing to do. But it's very concerning when it's an area where there is contamination, because Supervisor Stumble's done some article reading, and it says, yeah, that's great unless there's contamination, and there is contamination on the site. There's disputes about how much contamination, but there's disputes. And the last thing I'll say on that is there's a big push to make this back to its natural form. That horse has left the barn, because you don't cut down 15 acres of old-growth forest if you're concerned about keeping a place in its natural form. And again, not our land. We don't get to say anything about it, but I do think we should press back when people tell us, well, it has to be in its natural form. Well, the oak forest full of animals was in its natural form, and we had no problem clear-cutting that to the ground. So people are telling two different stories when it comes to our community and whether we have the right to have like a clean environment and those types of things. So again, Mike, I appreciate you, but again, that's the question I have. So what happens when this comes back? And I guess we should be grateful. They're going to do a baseline for us for free. But what happens if after that sediment is removed and it comes down the river and it sits, what happens then? Because, I mean, that's not a good thing.
No.
Like, we were very careful with Galt Village, making sure that any environmental problems, we did not want to push on other people. We did a lot of research about the best way to do it. We kept things encapsulated for a purpose. We hired somebody to watch over it and monitor to make sure it's safe. Everybody's just acting like, psh, tear it out, it goes down, there won't be any problems. I don't know that I believe that to be true. And I'm pretty certain that many, many of the residents do not believe that to be true. The people on the river. A lot of people make it about, oh, they just have this property on the river and they like their big river. That's not what I've heard people say. They're very worried about the contamination
And the habitat.
and the habitat that's there. And so, thank you, Mike, but know that we gotta know so what, when it comes back.
Yes. No,
And it
yeah.
isn't hunky-dory.
Right. And I think this process is, and I would like to believe they're doing their due diligence on to help prevent that from happening. But we know things can go wrong. And I think in part of it to be involved with the state, if their plan doesn't work, there is going to be consequences. There was dam removal that didn't go right up north. So you got, the state got involved about cleanup, went out by Kalamazoo. There's a river system out there right now that got basically turned upside down because of sediment. And they're going to go through that legal system to get that cleaned up. So they won't get off the hook. It will take time to clean it up. But having this baseline is the first step to show where we stand today and what happens at the end. So therefore, we have a path or a mechanism to follow to show something went wrong. And then during the whole process, it's going to be monitored. And, we can easily put out extra sensors to check turbidity and to see what else we can monitor coming into the lake. So, but again, that costs money too. So we can look at options to see to protect our resource or our lake. So I am very open and concerned as well. But I don't think they're going to just rip it out and all that's just going to wash away. I don't think they can just do that. Now, Mother Nature may have her own plan, but again, if something were to happen, there's going to have to be some consequences. So.
Because we've done such a great job with your stewardship of taking care of our dam. And again, this is not my area, so maybe I'm wrong in this. When that gets pushed down, is that going to put additional hardship on our dam, or will the water just be fine because there's a bigger water that it's coming into?
And today, the water that's passing down the river comes into Ford Lake, and then when that dam is gone, it's just going to come just like it was yesterday.
Okay.
So it's not going to have any impact whatsoever. And if they do their shoreline stabilization as they should, we'll never see any change whatsoever.
Okay.
Mr. Winter?
Mike, just out of curiosity, years ago at the pen and paper dam, I used to, growing up, you could actually see that river be red,
Yeah.
orange, green from all the chemicals that came out of the pen and paper, pencil paper company. Just out of curiosity, do you know if those chemicals that were used back then in the paper mill production, did those settle into the actual riverbed, because I'm not joking when I said the river would actually be green.
Oh, I've heard the story many times,
I
yeah.
actually saw it many, many times, because it was a very active plant during the 60s and 70s and maybe even part of the 80s. So it was it was almost glowing at times with the amount of chemicals
Yeah.
that were coming out of that.
Yeah. Everybody knew what color paper they were making that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and that discharge was below the dam, so it would have traveled the river and downstream and settled into Ford Lake if it made it. I don't know if those chemicals made it down the river that far. I couldn't tell you. I have no data to show one way or the other. So, but I know that chemical is not in the impoundment they have today, what is subject for dewatering. So, now, it would be interesting when they do these core samples to look at the chemistry makeup to see if any of that would come from the paper company. However, there would be no recourse to go back to the paper company to clean it up because they're no longer there. So, but history is history, but facts are facts. So we could just look at what's there.
Which brings into question this so-called orphan fund. I don't know at the DEQ, so I'm just kind of curious about what was in those chemicals, because
Yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah.
Is this the only area, Michael, they're going to be sampling, or are they going to do it up the river as well, or just this area? Because it would make sense to do it in more than just...
I don't have a detail of the entire sediment plan or program that they are proposing for this project. All I know is they want to focus on our section of the headwaters of Ford Lake. They might be doing more, but they didn't share that.
I would like, I think it would be good to do more than just at the bottom where it finally gets to us.
Right.
And the way it's written, it's going to help us understand the volume and level of contamination that's present in the sediment. And they're up in the upper reaches of Ford Lake. So they're aware of some of the contamination in Ford Lake.
Well, and I
already.
think they're probably also doing this for their protection too, because we could say, well, after the event is all this contamination, but now there's a baseline. What was there prior to and what was there after? So, because that area had the old wastewater plant.
Right.
You had manufacturing in the area. So there's going to be some kind of leftovers, right? That's going to be already there. So that's what I think they're also kind of interested to see where their baseline starts at. So also I think this is important that I should say is once this data is available, it's going to probably be public. So at some point that might come back out in the future as of any future use or maintenance on the dam, or we have to dewater for maintenance. Those soils might become part of that project. So if we know what comes out of it. So we currently sample 4 to 6 sites on Ford Lake every 10 years, part of our water quality plan for the dam. So we're taking a record of what's in there and what's changing over time. So at some point, that data will also be part of a potential remediation or cleanup project. So this is not going to be something to use tomorrow, but it's going to be something in the back of our library for later. So I'm hoping that the Penn Dam project happens and everything happens perfect. Similar results that we did out at Tyler Dam when we lowered that pond. It was very slow process and methodical, and we didn't have any problems there. And that's West Willow, right around those plants, and how much contamination's around that area. And we didn't have any problems with that.
We repaired it, though.
Well, so we dewatered and got rid of the hazard and cleaned up the shoreline and did a lot of stabilization, which then benefited the downstream
We repaired the
environment.
dam, though.
Well, actually, we left the dam alone. We never,
The whiffle,
the weep holes.
weeples.
Yeah. So by getting rid of the water, we got rid of the problem, right? So you could call it a repair, but we got rid of the source. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and I attended a meeting as well with Ypsi City and Ypsi Township residents, and there were, I think there was one city council member, and this was, discussed, and they were going to plan on trucking 200 truckloads, like large truckloads of contamination out of there, and now they're going to leave it. They're not going to remove what they said they were going to do. They're going to reshape it or something. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do, but I do think that it would behoove us to probably learn more about the plan and the
Right.
chemistry, and not you, I mean, an expert in that area to see, because there was some bad chemicals, they said that.
Yeah, and I know we ran into pockets out there at Tyler Dam
Right.
too, and the levels weren't high enough to remove, but we were able to put them at a different spot above the high water mark. They stayed on site, but they were not part of the lands or the areas subject to watering. So that was the I guess, compromise. So we didn't have to spend that extra money to take it to a special landfill. So I haven't looked back at the values on that, what they have at Penn Dam, but that might be what they're trying to propose, is as long as it's outside their watermark, it may not become part of the problem. So I'd have to.
And we also talked about, and it was agreed to from 2 mayors ago, that they would make sure the residents who own property on that river, that they would do a legal description, and it would be given, because on the city side, it goes to the residents, I guess. On the township side, it doesn't. So I haven't seen the results of that
I don't either. Yeah, that was very interesting.
And, I mean, it was like agreed that they would do that, and we still don't have anything in regards to that. For the residents do not want to, and after listening, I agree. I can understand why, and everything I read about dam removal and restoration, as long as it's not contaminated. And this Penn is, and ours probably is as well.
There's areas, yes.
Yeah. So.
Not all of it, but there are areas, so. Right.
I think when they were talking about removing it, like I said, people liked it. Well, better, at least it was going to be their time to remove stuff. It's just going to stay in place and then more property.
Right. Well,
Right.
yeah, and I take this project, or the Penn Dam project, as a, so to speak, win. Because if the dam were to fail and that water would come down, it would take all those soils that have not been mitigated, and they would bring them towards Ford Lake, or pension it right into Ford Lake. So from that standpoint, the Penn Dam removal is good for the environment. But they have to address what's there so it's properly handled, so it doesn't become a new path for the environment that it's going to hurt it. So this is a very tricky project. So.
Thank you, Mike. I know John Hines is here, and you have the request to seek sealed bids for the renovation of the Green Oaks Golf Course bathrooms and to seek sealed bids for the construction and replacement of the Civic Center carport.
Good evening, John Hines, Municipal Services Director. Yes, so I brought forward the request for authorization to seek sealed bids for the renovation of the Green Oaks Golf Course restrooms as part of the ARPA funding approved earlier this year. The bid package is prepared by Stantec, and the goal would be to go out to bid later on this week and bring back an awarded bidder at the December 5th meeting, and a representative from Stantec will be here at that meeting.
Questions or comments? The November, we're looking at calling it a November 1st special meeting for the community center, is that correct?
Yes, Stantec was hoping to bring forward the recommendation for the awarded bidder for the community center bathroom and insurance renovation project at a November 1st special board meeting. The bids for that closes next Thursday, so that'll give them just over or around a week to get everything prepared to bring forward.
Thank you. The next item, carport.
Okay. Yeah, so the next item is the request to seek sealed bids for the construction replacement of the Civic Center carport. And this is just to follow a continuation from the last meeting where we approved OHM to oversee the bid preparation, construction, and award. So their hope is by bringing the request tonight to have another 7 to 10 days to finalize the package, I think with input from Attorney Winters, if there is any, and have just under a month with the bid opening to hopefully get more bidders, and then bring it back to the December 5th meeting as well for award. And Matt Parks will be at the December 5th meeting to answer any questions that might be about the awarded contractor.
Questions or comment? The project will start, hopefully.
The project would start, I think pre-construction meetings would happen at the end of December with construction starting in early 2024, depending on the weather. But really want to get that moving as quickly as possible.
Okay. All right. We also have the senior contract between Washtenaw County and Ypsilanti Township for senior nutrition that we do annually. Are there any questions on that? It has been reviewed by the attorney. And there's a request to purchase 4 Verity print ballot printing units in the amount of $25,676, and it's from Hart. Right. And there's an updated memo in the packet. Clerk Rowe?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has questions. Just a brief overview of what this system is that, hold on, let me get our memo up. There was a little handout, I believe, that went in along with the packet. I don't know why this isn't, there it goes. So Verity Print is basically this system that you see in front of you at these early vote sites that we're going to have, rather than housing a bunch of ballots, like, for example, the presidential election in February. We have 19 precincts. Each of those precincts would have 3 different ballot types, leaving us with 57 different types of ballots to be, secured, housed, stored, to 57 different types of mistakes you could make by picking the wrong one. So this system actually comes in, just like if you were at the poll, you would come in, you'd greet your person, let them know who you are, provide, that your driver's license or state ID, or sign your declaration saying you are who you are. And then the scanner would scan, your voter information up, and it would pull my exact information up. So on that screen, it would say, oh, this is Heather Rowe, she lives in precinct 2, this is the ballot that she needs, and it would allow it to be printed on demand automatically. The paper that is used for this would also come from PSI, who prints the ballots normally, or you could purchase it directly from Hart. But my inclination is that going with PSI, which is what we always do anyways, would probably be what we would do. So that's what the system is. The invoice is for a total of 4 of these, 2 for each site, so there's not a single point of failure at any site. And they do include the printer. And if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
Questions or comment?
I have a question. So you're saying there's 2 at each site. Mm-hmm. This is the only way that a person would receive a ballot?
At an early vote site.
At an early vote site. My understanding, I thought we weren't doing the early vote site.
We have to do the early vote site, no matter what. We chose to not do it with the county, but we still are required to do it.
Oh, I didn't know I had to leave.
So
I didn't know that. So you're not obligated to do it with the county. Mm-hmm. Is it by state law that you have to do an early vote site within 9 days prior to the election?
Yes, just for state and federal elections, though. So like if we on an off year have a millage or a school election, we'll look at the turnout. If the turnout has been low, then maybe it doesn't make sense to have those early vote sites for those elections. But it's really hard to say, especially now. This will be our first time ever doing it. I know that other states that have early vote sites, their turnout somewhere between like 15 and 20%, but that's a really big, it's hard to say who's going to go to these sites.
So with, excuse me, with the early vote site, will that vote site be here? Because I was reading the last minutes. It would be here, and then also I was reading the minutes that, what was it, another city or something could also vote here. So would it just be our township voting here
So that
for that early vote site?
we're going to have a site here and at the community center, and that will only be for our residents,
So
our
no
voters.
one else can come and vote in this district but township people?
That's correct.
Also, with the two new ballot system, is that all you're going to need? Is it going to be enough to produce the quality of people coming in, you know?
Yeah.
So if you got 5,000 people coming in here and vote in a couple of days, and you only have 2 of those which would produce the ballots, because there's no other ballots that's going to be made. It's not going to be made up like it used to be. This system will produce all ballots. What happens if it breaks down?
So first I want to just clarify. So this would just be for the early vote sites. So we're still going to order regular ballots for absentee and for behind the clerk's counter that'll be in my office. So that we can issue absentee ballots at the counter and put them in the mail. At the precincts, they're still going to have their standard ordered stock ballots that they always do. Nothing will change at those, in my office, nothing will change. And at the precincts, nothing will change. At the early vote sites is the only place that we would be using these ballot printing on demand, is what it is, it's on demand printing. And I'm asking for 4 on here so that we'll have 2 at each site. So like you said, if one breaks down, you've got a backup. But also it's, Hart actually has a rough recommendation of how many you should have. They really suggest if you're going to have 3, and it's about how many tabulators you're using. We will use 2 tabulators at each site, and their recommendation for bigger municipalities is that, like, if you're using 3 tabulators, you should have 4. If you're 4 print systems, if you're having, they had a rough recommendation of how many to use based on the number of tabulators. We're only using 2 tabulators at our early vote sites to start. Like, if it turns out that everyone loves early voting, maybe we can do more tabulators. But for right now, having 2 Verity prints to our 2 tabulators is sufficient.
Okay, with this new system, how is the training going to go with those poll workers?
Yeah, we'll need training first on this equipment from Hart. And once we're comfortable with the equipment, then we would just incorporate that with our poll worker training.
Do you know anybody else who's using?
I know that Ann Arbor is purchasing these. I know that the county is purchasing these. The whole county uses Hart. It's each county has a different thing, but so at least Ann Arbor and the county, all of their voting sites will be using these.
So this mechanism just prints a ballot. After that, it goes in the same process of submitting the ballot to the
Tabulator.
tabulator.
Yep. So I would still, just hand you one ballot. It'd be the one I just printed. You'd go fill it out, and then you would put it in. The tabulators will be broken down by precinct. So precincts 1 through 9 will go into one tabulator. 10 through 19 will go into another one. So you would just be told what one is appropriate for you to put it in.
And there's no way, this is my last question, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There's no way that a person could come in, get a ballot from that machine, and then get another ballot from the desk. I'm just asking.
That's my best.
I hope it's to
understanding
go.
of how it works.
But I was saying, elections drive me crazy, but anyway, I'm saying that is there going to be there's always a certain number behind getting a ballot, 1, 2, 4, 5. You get that ballot from the machine, a person can go back up there the next day and get a dang old ballot at the desk. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's a good question. So one of the, a better example to start is that if I sent you an absentee ballot at home.
Right.
And then you go to the polls to try and vote that absentee ballot. You've already been given a ballot, now you're at the
And
polls.
submitted it.
So then the poll worker is gonna, right now, how it works is they will call our office. We get a lot of calls on election day for this, like hundreds. And they'll say, hey Heather, hey Lisa, I have Gloria Peterson here and she's wanting to vote at the polls and I just wanted to make sure that she has not submitted an absentee ballot. I'll go into the qualified voter file, I'll look you up, I'll see that you did not submit a ballot yet, and I will then reject that old ballot. So it basically cancels out the old ballot. Then you'd be permitted to vote at that site. That way, if you had tried to sneak it in the ballot box up front, we're not, like later on, if we tried to scan it in, it would just stop us.
So will that new device tell you that I already submitted an absentee ballot, and then there's some kind of data on that equipment that says you can't pull a ballot from this new system?
So not on this device itself. This device is going to be talking.
But will it tell you if I came back around and got a ballot off that new device?
So this system is going to be talking to and receiving information from the qualified voter file. Okay, so like this is my qualified voter file. And it's going to talk to the ballot printing system on demand. So this new qualified voter file is going to be an updated electronic poll book, which the state is still crafting today as we speak. But it's going to be live. And so in theory, it will work the same way where there will be that safeguard of, oh, wait, you can't because you've already been issued a ballot and or someone else has already rejected your old ballot. Kind of like the example I gave of like how it works right now. In theory, with the new live e-poll book that is being crafted by the state, it will prohibit anyone else from having two ballots. I know that wasn't, that was a long way to explain that.
Thank you.
Other question?
Oh.
Mr. Newman?
Yeah, you pretty much answered my information, my question. Where will it pull its information from?
So the qualified voter file, if sometimes I'll call it QVF, that's what we call it, but it's the qualified voter file. And that is a system that is, operated from the top down, the Secretary of State and the Bureau of Elections, and then our office accesses it. That's how the system we use today to issue ballots, to receive ballots in, to change voter registrations, and all of those things. So the new electronic poll book will be pulling information from the state-ran qualified voter file.
Okay. And there won't be a lapse of time, like Trustee Peterson was mentioning, that you could possibly do two things in one, but it wouldn't be enough time to catch it. Is that possible?
You're talking about some very new system. So is it impossible? It's probably very unlikely, but it's going to be a new system that we're working on. There are going to be a bunch of safeguards in place, as there already are with our current processes. And, we're trusting and relying on the state for making sure that those safety and security measures are implemented.
Okay. So the training would be provided on the volunteers to use it properly?
The election workers.
Election workers.
And I was sharing with Supervisor Stumbo that the state finally just posted some training for Prop 2 for all of its clerks. So the first in-person Prop 2 trainings will be available for clerks starting this Friday. So just for context.
Wow. Elections are in 2 weeks?
Our one election is, but this will all of the Prop 2 stuff must be implemented by the presidential primary, which is in February. But still,
Okay.
it's our,
Right.
oh.
Okay.
Trustee Swanson?
So I was wondering, you mentioned paper, I was wondering about the ink. So is the ink, are they cartridges, or do we have to buy that, or how does that work?
So everything, the tabulators and the system will use the same printers that are, we have a thing called a VAT, a voter-assisted tabulator right now that we use, and it uses the same sort of methodology to print if anyone uses that. And so it's possible that we'll have to purchase, ink and toner down the road. The toner cartridges usually go out, but that would just go into our annual.
And then I didn't see, I was looking for it in here, but there's so much in the packet. In the past, when we've purchased election equipment, we've had to have service contracts. Is that the case with this?
I actually asked that clarifying question because that is normally true, and it is, so when you purchase the HART equipment, years 1 through 5 are covered. Years 6 through 10 are the responsibility of the municipality. So we have one that we pay for now for tabulators and for our high-speed tabulator. HART does not currently have one because they're in discussion with the state about how that's going to look in the future.
And then because this is like state mandated, do we have the possibility of receiving reimbursement for the equipment that we're purchasing?
So another great question. There is a possibility. The county submits all of the things that, for what municipalities are participating or not participating. The way the state has structured the funding is that the most funding will go to people participating in the county agreement, as you guys remember. Next would be any municipalities that are doing it together. And then lastly, it would be individual municipalities. So then I followed that up with, well, how much is it going to be? Like, what are we getting back? And they don't even have a good estimate of what they will be receiving as a county. And I know that I don't like that answer either, but that's the one I got.
It's a little concerning because anytime you make a project bigger, like all the questions that we're asking right now, is going to be the same, whether ballots get where they're supposed to be or whatever, when it's the county organized group doing it. And I know that decision's already passed, but it just seems harsh to penalize communities for wanting to be careful, like we decided we wanted to do, in making sure the first time we're doing this stuff that we're doing it in a way that's manageable from that side. So that just seems hard. Seems like maybe that's something we need to talk to our state representation about.
It's an unfunded space.
So thank you for that. So warranty, all that kind of stuff, not necessarily. And then it's good to see, I guess, given the worry about something breaking down, which they do, maybe eventually if it's going smoothly, we might have to have actually another spare. That way, if something did go down and the other one went down, you have the way, you're not taking something from the other site, because you never want to leave it without one. So I appreciate the two at each site.
Okay. I got two more. I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
You want to go?
Anyone have, just, can I,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
did you have, you didn't have a question?
I guess also, I'm reading the terms of petition, deliver includes removal and salvage of the customer's existing voting system at no extra cost. What does that mean? They're taking some of our old equipment?
No, that's just their standard terms. Like if we had been replacing this, you can't just get rid of or auction off election equipment. So,
So also, I guess my next little question is that if it happens to break down, would we go to the old process of just deliver? And are we just using those just for that 9-day early voting? Is that throughout the whole election that we'll be using them?
these will just be for the 9-day early voting site. And we'll have 2 of these at each site. So
Right.
if one were to break down, there is the backup.
Okay, but if that one breaks down, will that voting process? I'm just
No, I'm
saying.
kidding. I know.
Will
worry
that
about
process
too.
still continue with the old way to get a ballot? Just say it just stops, both of them.
The bypass.
The bypass then. So the bypass, if both of them stop functioning, is it legal to go back to giving them a ballot of some type?
We would, if that happened, if we were at an early vote site and both of my Verity prints broke down, we would troubleshoot and have HART on site, and they would either have to bring me a replacement. Like, we couldn't just go pull from our other stock, you know? And I feel comfortable with 2 at each site, but I'm open to, and very comfortable with, like, if you guys wanted to make it 5 instead of 4, so that we have an extra backup that's in the election room. I mean, I'm always.
So if it did
happy
break
to do
out,
that.
you would, if you couldn't get any other ballots, you would just have to cease the voting process.
So both of them would have to break.
Yes, I said.
Okay. So then both of them are broken, and in my head, I would go through, like, just all the troubleshooting things. First, we're definitely getting heart here. Hopefully they don't break at the same time, but, like, you know, weirder things
It's
have
just-
happened, right?
Yeah.
So then I would get heart here. I would definitely notify the county that we were having that situation in case they know of another Verity print that could be programmed and on site at that time. And then the other thing that I would be thinking is, could we afford to take one of the other 2 from the other site back here? You know, so those are kind of the things I would do to troubleshoot. But we would not stop voting. It could, like, if both of them broke at the same time, it could cause a delay and a slower time for residents to vote.
Thank you.
And just that I want to, in that case, we would still, because it's 9-day early voting, have options to offer them. You could go over to the clerk's office right now, get an absentee ballot, and vote that, which I don't even want to dive into that, but they're also saying the state believes that those absentee ballots could then be brought and voted here. Like, if I mailed you one to your house and you didn't want to put it in the mail, you could then come in here, bring it, open it, and put it in the tabulator. But the manual for all of these things is, again, not even created, so.
I was just thinking that, if I heard you, and 1 through 9 and then 10 through 19, so you have both of them programmed?
Both of the tabulators, not the Verity print.
Okay. So that.
Yeah, and that's more for the reporting at the end, because if you do more than 10 precincts on a tabulator, it will only generate the summary report rather than the ones you actually need on election night.
And I think I did call our GCSI, our lobbyist, and said it's a unfunded mandate. How can counties get it and communities can't? And he said it was his understanding that, because there are other communities in Wayne County, Canton Township, other communities have Milan, Ann Arbor, I think Lima, but I think you're going to submit anyways to the county clerk for reimbursement.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
I will try to get as much funding back as we can for our township.
I think there's like there's a process you have to do in order to submit to the county clerk for reimbursement. And I didn't know if we should add paper purchase or.
The paper is going to be ordered when we order ballots, so.
Because it's a federal election, and we're going to get reimbursed for the ballots, I think, right?
Not for, no, because we'll be on,
We'll be on what?
like, we'll be on the ballot.
Not in February.
Not in February, so, yes. We will not be.
No, right, the federal and elections are what's reimbursed, right? February.
There's still federal positions on the November ballot, like president, vice president, things like that. But we don't get reimbursed for that particular election because the board is on the ballot for the August and the November elections. So for instance, the special election.
Can you go to the mic, Deputy Stanfield?
Sorry. So, for example, the special election that we're having right now in November, which is Lincoln Consolidated Schools, they will have to reimburse us for supplies that are used for that. Typically, the rule around that is anything that, like if we buy pens, we can't get reimbursed for those because we're going to be able to reuse those like further down the line. The February election would be reimbursed by the parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party, because they're requiring us to hold this election. But then when it moves to August and November, the township board is on both of those ballots, and so those are not reimbursable because your positions are on those as well.
So the time to submit for anything to be reimbursed would be now, right? So I would probably submit for paper and ink if you want backup. I'm just thinking ahead, the time, if I hear what you're saying.
Madam Chair, I'll just add to that, and I know we sort of talked about it a little more in depth, but this is.
Thank you, Lisa.
There's probably other things that are coming. One of our staff people's going to training on Friday, then I'm going on the 30th. And there's going to be more stuff that we'll need. The things that we talked about were like the ballot bags. I just need to really make sure we have enough things in place to keep secure. So this will not be the last thing that we bring back for early voting stuff, and we'll make sure that we get everything together and submit everything that we can for hopeful reimbursement.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a time frame. That's all I did know for the submission. So if we authorize this, then we should submit that and continue, or I'm not sure. I'll try to get clarity on it because like you said, nothing's clear really on the process yet.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to adjourn now and before our 7 o'clock. Yeah, I was going to do, but before we do, we have Destiny Taylor is here. Hi, Destiny. I heard that Destiny did a fantastic job on representing the community at a meeting that was held by Congresswoman Dingle in regards to reliable electric for the residents. You talked about the medicine and food that was spoiled, and you were very impactful. You made the news on TV, you made the news at MLive, and we just want to give you this appreciation plaque. And thank you for your service at such a young age, and continue to advocate like you have and articulate for those who need help and reliable energy and whatever issues that you find important. You're a blessing, Destiny, and we just wanted to give this to you as well.
Bravo. Bravo. Anybody got a camera? Oh, she got a camera. Brenda, can I get a picture for us? Or she could send it to us? Anybody could take it. Might be my backup, Heather. Yes. Cool, thank you.
Destiny.
You might want it for newspaper or something.
Okay, we're going to adjourn and take a small break.